Hey, everybody, I'm Dr. Michael Hyland, your host. Welcome to the Parkinson's Warrior podcast. And I'm really excited. Today we have a special guest. Today with me on the show, I have Dr. Dian Ginsberg. She is a board certified OBGYN and a physician and a mother of two. Is that right?
Two boys.
Yes, two boys. And she resides in the great state of Texas. And that's all you need to know. No, just kidding. So from here, I wanted to get out of the way a little bit because I want Dr. Ginsberg to give us a little bit of an introduction to her, to herself and her practice, because the reason you might have thought, what the heck, she's an OBGYN. So, but that's where we lead into this conversation, because she currently helps people with Parkinson's disease with a pretty interesting and amazing treatment method that we're going to be talking about. And this is an alternative method to the traditional pharmaceutical treatment that we know and love in the Western world. But without further ado, I want to let Dr. Ginsberg take the chair for a minute and tell us a little bit about herself and how basically she fell into this world of Parkinson's disease and working with these wonderful people in the great state of Texas and beyond. So Diane, thank you so much for being on today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. And yeah, a lot of people turn around and say, how as an OB-GYN did you become interested in any kind of really neurologic disease, wrong end of the body? So long story short, I was an OB-GYN resident in North Carolina at Bowman Gray's, where I did my training. And I tell people I was a up all night, donut eating, carbohydrate, coffee drinking body, because that's what kept us alive through residency. Came out of my residency at 30 with a not great microbiome and delivered baby number 1. And then 3 years later, baby number 2. Both boys decided not to talk until my older one was about 3.5, and my younger one had absolutely no language, no comprehensive or spoken language at 5 years old. And we were in Texas at that time. I took them to everybody in the Texas Medical Center. I took them to ENTs with their heads scanned. We did everything. And the little one, they told me after an evaluation at 5 years old that he had an IQ of 47, was severely mentally retarded, and would never have language. I was about 40 years old at that point. And at the about same time, I was practicing OB-GYN, the Women's Health Initiative in 2002 that said hormone replacement therapy gives you cancer broke. So women that were using hormones for years and years and seeing great results and feeling better panicked, threw their hormones out. Well, 3 months later, they're miserable because the hot flashes are back. They can't think, their brain doesn't function because your brain doesn't work without estrogen.
Right.
So I had a combination of kids with issues plus miserable patients. A small pharmacy that was using bioidentical hormone replacement. I don't even like to use the word natural, because natural is you can't take yams and eat them, right? You have to turn around and chemically turn that product into something that actually sits on the estrogen receptor. So that's where identical comes from. Looks just like the natural estrogen your ovary makes. I was studying that, realizing that I needed to learn more, and Googled bioidentical hormone conference, and the American Academy of Anti-Aging came up, and I went to their meeting, fell in love with functional medicine, and went through their whole program, learning vitamin D, microbiome, the importance of all that balance, micronutrients, omega-3 in cell membranes, keeping nutrients where they need to be. Putting all that together, brought it home and carried it out with the kids, kind of practiced what I learned. And to this day, now my older one is a third-year medical student, and my younger one is about to start a master's program at Baylor's in sports pedagogy. Now, both my kids have processing dyslexia. So the brain will get affected by what it got affected by. And we can talk a little bit free radicals and probably what their microbiome was, and then the food I fed them until I learned more about it. So kind of like with Parkinson's and with issues like we see in patients now, it doesn't get 100% better, but it got to the point where you can work around the tree, if you would, to be extremely successful. So I integrated all of that into my OB-GYN practice, and infertility patients weren't infertile anymore. People that failed IVF didn't have, they were able to get pregnant. And then in the last few years, I'm 57, as I saw what was going on with the aging female, where there's a lot of space that's not covered. The OB-GYN is too busy dealing with surgery, delivering babies. Nobody can really worry about that female as she gets into her 50s and she's miserable. And the word is, oh, just deal with the hot flashes. Well, meanwhile, down the road, your brain is going to not function. So that's where all the symptoms come from. And that's why you're seeing, I think, more Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So that's where I started to fall in love with the aging population and helping them. And what started to come in as well, would you take care of my husband? Well, my neighbor has this neurodegenerative unexplained problem. And that's how I started to treat more Parkinson's, looking at the microbiome, running micronutrient deficiency tests, doing a GI map. And then recently, a wealthy investor that became more interested in opening a center that really could change the way aging and aging diseases are looked at, donated money, along with a plasma company, Spectrum Plasma, who collects plasma of kids, or I should say young adults, between the ages of 18 and 25, because the factors in young plasma appear to be so healing. And this concept came off all the rat studies done at Stanford. So the rat and mouse studies showed that when you take young plasma and you inject it in older mice with Alzheimer's and Parkinsonian-like symptoms, they got better. So then that's where this study came about, where we hung the young plasma on some patients, placebo on others, and saw the significant improvement. So it's looking now at nutrients meets microbiome meets plasma, not just medicating something as you continue to decline.
Right. And you bring up an amazing, first of all that background is pretty incredible, especially with the success of your sons after going through some of the treatment we're talking about. But yeah, you bring up a great point there about basically masking the symptoms, or we're not treating the underlying cause of a disease. We're treating managing symptoms of that disease, which traditionally has been what we're doing with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So going into that a little bit, one of the things that you brought up was the microbiome of the gut. Something that in the past couple of years I've discovered as well is discussion about the gut-brain connection with Parkinson's disease, and those connections with the microbiome. And basically how we are not feeding our gut what it needs, or are feeding our gut things that are detrimental to that microbiome. Can, without going too much into detail on the surface, I know that to be, or a couple of things to be examples would be increased wheat, gluten, as well as dairy products, but also dairy in particular, from what I understand, can also increase acidity in the whole body because and inflammation. So, but specifically with the gut biome and the gut-brain connection with Parkinson's, what would you say in your research or experience has been like the most impactful in terms of essentially foods to avoid?
Yeah, so here's how I want everybody to think of this. The number one thing that is going to keep you healthy is gut microbiome diversity. The more different bugs you got, the healthier you are, period, without question. That's been proven. Number two, unfortunately, the number one thing or number two thing that leads to microbiome loss of diversity is aging. So you have to think of the bugs in your gut. You don't own them. They choose to be there. So as you get older and the system's not where it was, they turn around and go, I'm out of here. I'm going to look for a different place to live. So we got to keep that in mind. Now, you need to keep them there. You need to entice them. The number one thing that maximizes diversity is plant rotation. The more different plants you eat, the happier they are. Okay, so that keeps everything at a base. When the bugs need to be able to jump on some kind of fiber, in the colon. So your intestine is hooked together where you have stomach, right, where you dissolve everything with hydrochloric acid. Small intestine has some bacteria, not a ton, and most of the microbiome where the different bugs reside in your colon. So I want you to think about food coming through, gets dissolved in the stomach acid into the small intestine. Everything important is absorbed, and then the toxins are kind of sent, or the leftover garbage is sent into the colon for the bugs to jump on, party on, if you would, bulk everything up. And while they're partying, they are making your B1, B2, biotin, and your short chain fatty acids. And those short chain fatty acids are actually the wallpaper that keep your gut intact. So you can keep all the bad stuff in. So if you have less good party going on down there, you make less short chain fatty acids. Well, years ago, fiber was a simple wheat molecule. Now, why are wheat and dairy significant? Because wheat and dairy, or the casein that's made when dairy is pasteurized, do not dissolve in water. Therefore, they don't dissolve in hydrochloric acid. So they enter the small intestine solid. Now, the immune system used to look at the wheat and say, oh my God, that's got to go to the microbiome. Nobody touch it, but we're good with it. Let it go. As wheat has been genetically modified and the gluten peptide is changed, visualize that the small intestine system looks at it, and the immune system goes, oh my God, who are you? I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't let you to go to the microbiome. So the body shoots inflammation at it. And when that happens, bugs die along the way. The party can't happen like it needs to happen. And the demand to make more short chain fatty acids increases because you're kind of throwing ticker tape every day. Well, over time, as you age, you can't clean up the mess as fast. You don't digest foods as well. You don't make as many of the cell membranes as you need. You don't absorb the nutrients you need. All this is problem number one. And remember, just because somebody tells you you don't have celiac doesn't mean you're not a gluten reactor. And that's what happens to a lot of people. Their gut bothers them and they goes, my doctor says I don't have celiac. I don't care. Get off it. If you've got inflammatory problems, which is what Parkinson's is, an neurodegenerative disease, get off it. So I think what we believe happens over time now is kind of two aspects. L-DOPA and some of the dopamine precursors that the brain uses are made by your microbiome. If those guys are getting hammered and you've got good dudes that are dying and the bad guys that are overgrowing, the precursors that are sent up to your brain to make dopamine, problem number one. Problem number two, and there's still, I know, some controversy about this, but what they believe happens is that some of these kind of leftover inflammatory molecules are this alpha-synuclein that gets laid down. And what's supposed to happen is the body should be able to clean it up as fast as it's getting laid down. But if you get to the point where the free radicals and the cost of doing business is higher than what your body can clean up, they're thinking it may propagate up the vagus nerve. So now what happens is you dump garbage into the substantia nigra, or into the brainstem area, and it affects the brain. Now, here's where some of the problems I think come in. What color is the substantia nigra? Dark,
black,
brown, right? Because it's got melanocortin in it. And one of melanocortin's jobs, remember, it gets darker as you get older, the substantia nigra. It's light when you're younger because it's got a lot of ability to help the free radicals. So kind of from a simplistic thought process, and I always like to think of things simple, is that it's going to absorb the shock of all the inflammation because those cells are going to try to squelch those free radicals. Well, if you get to the point like anything else where you overload the system, now their second job is to make dopamine. They can't. So now you get behind the 8 ball. And then one of the other things that happens, really important, think about it, is that you make your neurotransmitters in your gut. The gut microbiome, those bugs make your neurotransmitters. So what are neurotransmitters? So dopamine makes you motivated, right? Serotonin makes you calm. GABA makes you calm. Adrenaline or epinephrine makes you go. Well, if you have gut microbiome dysfunction and you've got too many of the go guys and not enough of the calm guys, what happens is you don't rest as well. You don't sleep at night. You don't get into deep sleep. You don't get into REM sleep. Big thing that people in Parkinson's will talk about. I have sleep dysfunction. And remember, they'll have REM issues. They
Right.
start shooting around in their REM sleep. So if you read, there's a wonderful book by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. And he talks about how when you're in deep sleep and REM sleep, the glymphatic system cleans out alpha-synuclein or the amyloid plaques from Alzheimer's, whatever it is. So if you're not getting into this deep sleep, I don't think you clean the garbage out. And the combination of the brain trying to compensate for this. And then on top of that, the brain says, I got to clean myself out. And the brain starts to make more ATP or energy. And the pathway it goes down makes a lot more, right? Makes a lot more quinolinic acid.
Yes.
So you make chirinic acid is calming, and then you'll make quinolinic acid as more free radicals. Well, you make that as a byproduct as you're trying to make all this ATP or energy to clear up the system, and then the brain gets toxic. So the system just falls behind the 8 ball, and you compensate and compensate until you can't. So I know that's kind of a long explanation, but I hope for everybody it puts a lot together to why it's not about your doc says, oh, I'm not gluten problem. Oh, I'm not this. It's understanding these are your bugs, and that's what you got to take care of. And I don't think it's ever too late to start that.
No, I think that's really important to emphasize because, we've talked a little bit about dairy and gluten. But there are also kind of in addition to, you mentioned multiple plants, but so essentially the opposite of avoiding those foods is adding in better ones. So,
Absolutely.
we talked about multiple plants, but then there are also a lot of foods out there that actually, I won't say they contain bacteria, but they basically essentially help the production of, or the addition of,
Right, the fermented foods. Yes.
exactly, like kombucha or kimchi. Yeah. So that's often, I've seen that recommended as well.
Anything that's gonna, because those are, what I tell people is those are prebiotics. And let me give everybody kind of a quick probiotic lesson. So everybody says, oh, I'm eating yogurt or I'm drinking kombucha for probiotics. So always remember, those bugs are exposed. When you send them flying through your stomach, they're going to get eaten by the hydrochloric acid.
Right, they'll get killed off. Yeah,
exactly. So it's the byproduct which is good to eat. So that's where yogurt's good. But please be careful because some of the yogurts are also dumped with sugar. So read the back of the yogurt, right? Because you'll think, oh, I'm eating all this Yoplait and it's wonderful for me. And meanwhile, it's a pile of sugar. Same thing with kombucha. Kombucha's got a lot of sugar in it. So sipping on it, a few sips a day or amounts of that are good, but I'd be very careful drinking tons and tons of it. Also, remember, kombucha or fermented foods have a lot of histamine in them. And histamine can really affect people that have some central nervous system issues. So if you do drink kombucha and you don't feel great on it, you may be that person. And so you may want to back down because histamine is a byproduct of fermentation. It's a big byproduct of digestion anyway. But a lot of times when the gut's off, the histamine levels are elevated. So you will, I've seen some people that drink kombucha and don't do well with it. So try it, sip on it, see if it helps. And then small amounts, again, not too high an amount, but that will support your system. And then take a probiotic, a coded probiotic from a reputable vitamin company.
Right. So essentially, prebiotics would be foods that would help to essentially prepare the gut for the introduction of those microbes, right?
And let your microbes that you have something to eat.
Got it. Okay.
The microbes that you already got also.
I wanted to clarify that for myself as well as for who's listening, because I think those terms can get intermingled sometimes. Absolutely. And they're not the same. So
absolutely.
So thanks for that clarification as well. So we've talked a lot about the gut-brain connection, which is fascinating to me, but also I want people to understand kind of how that led into, or maybe it's not led into, but how does that go side by side with what we've discussed with the plasma?
Well, I think what happens is, and we unfortunately in medicine are very reactionary. Right? You have a problem, right? So I don't feel good and I go to the doc and the doc does my pre-diabetes number, right? My hemoglobin A1C and that number is elevated and I'm going to kind of give you a pill. or,
Mhm.
this is a problem and I'm going to give you a pill on that. So we tend to be a little reactionary. And I don't blame my physician colleagues. I mean, I spent a long time going to med school, and it's a tough world out there because there's
Yeah.
insurance and your limited time, and so it's really difficult. So what we've moved into, unfortunately, is a little bit of that reactionary aspect. And I
Yeah.
think, unfortunately, in neurodegenerative disease, especially Parkinson's, that's some of what happens. I have these symptoms. You go to the doc, you get the diagnosis, and then because the side effects of the medicine, people know you can develop down the road. Initially, it's okay, here's your diagnosis, but then, let's hold off on that as long as possible. And there's sort of that middle of the road of, okay, what do I do? Just kind of go home and wait until I absolutely need that medicine to keep walking.
Right.
So what the concept, I think, of the young plasma is that over 25, factors that heal go down. It's just the aging process. You generally go up till kind of 25, 26, and then you lateral a little bit, and then the system starts to fall apart. And that's from a procreation standpoint. You can see it simplistically in the female aging, right? You go up till 30, and then by the time you're kind of in your 40s, you can't have a baby, and then you finish procreating down into menopause. So there's a cost. The way I would tell everybody to think of it is there's a cost of doing business of everything, including your body. And I heard Charles Brenner, who's a fascinating scientist in Iowa, he said, the two things you need to live in life are sunshine and food. And the two things that are going to kill you is sunshine and food. Because when you're in the sun, right, you create free radicals, but you need that to make energy. When you eat, just living, you're going to create these things that are going to taser your body, and you're going to have to repair. And as you repair, what you're going to do is you're going to take your DNA, which is all wound up into little strands in your cells. Visualize you're going to unwind it. You're going to make new proteins. You're going to make new cells, and then you're going to wind it back up again. Well, along with that, when you open that up, the DNA breaks. Your body tries to repair it, but it can't put it back together completely. So it is inefficient. It's like repairing your favorite sweater, right? You can only sew it enough until you go, you know what, it's time to move on. So that's how you age. Your efficiency to make what you used to make goes down. Your brain can't control the organs as well anymore. You can't turn the proteins over as much anymore. The layers of the skin, the fat layers don't bulge up as much. And that's why our skin starts to age. So I think what happens is if you increase your cost of doing business and you can't then remake what you need to remake, you can get to a point where you clean up your gut. There's a lot of people, a lot of studies where they're talking about it, and I think this all eventually leads into it, apheresis, where you remove the old cells, the old dead cells, and then you just put saline or albumin in. And that theory is that takes pressure off the system. But I think where the plasma is the missing piece is you can't, if the cells have gotten to the point where they just can't make what they used to, if it's damaged enough that it can't make what you need to survive the next 40 years, then you have to replace it. So what happens, I think, when you put these factors back in the central nervous system, you've cleaned up your gut, you've got your body back in line again, then you put these factors back in. Now what I think probably happens is the cell rejuvenates, it wakes up. It says, now I can do what I couldn't do before. And now I can sleep a little bit deeper, and now I can move a little bit easier. And we know from the literature that exercise and movement helps aging. So it's like anything else. Well, this breaks, and then I can't move, and then I don't feel good, then I don't exercise, and my brain gets worse. Now I got my Parkinson's diagnosis. Well, now if I get my pheresis or just hang my plasma, now I feel better. Now I got more motivation to eat better. And now my brain works a little better. And now I sleep a little deeper. Now I wake up the next day and I function more. Now I can move a little more. So that's how you move back into, to me, you've stopped the bad stuff from happening because you've dropped that gluten, dairy, sugary junk. You've put good stuff back into your microbiome and you're moving your body. But now you've hung some young factors that can rejuvenate what got lost in the first place. And I think that's how it comes together to really help people versus saying, okay, you're kind of heading down this hill, but I'll throw some meds your way. And the beauty of the plasma when we did the study is we don't take you off your meds. It's not like you have to stop your medication.
Right, right.
You stay right where you are. It's an adjuvant. Now, nothing would make us happier as we use it more than somebody go, hey, I feel better. I don't need my Cinemed anymore.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely, all this is an adjuvant to try to stop the process rather than just medicate until you just get so sick that you don't function anymore.
I'm glad you brought up that last point about this being essentially an adjunct to what you're doing already. This isn't meant to be a radical replacement of any treatment or modality. So, and not that I got that impression, but just I'm going to restate that verbally for everybody listening, just because like, I feel like everybody I've known with Parkinson's disease will do anything that they can do to help themselves. And that's one thing I think is unique. I should say most individuals I've worked with, but that there's an innate motivation with pretty much every person with Parkinson's I've ever met to do whatever it takes to get better, whether that's through exercise and or other alternative and complementary treatments in addition to their medicines. So
sometimes, unfortunately, though, what happens is that because dopamine is the motivating factor and dopamine is what's dropped, it's really hard. It's kind of like I see a lot with menopausal women. They'll come to me when estrogen's gone, your brain blows up. It doesn't function. So a woman will say, I'm trying, I just can't. And I think that's part of it also. She kind of knows what she needs to do, but until you get estrogen back in, now her brain functions again. And I think you see some of that. That's why when we did this study, right, and you look at the UPDRS, like the Parkinson scale, activities of daily living becomes important because you see improvements in that. And that person is now more apt to go to the store and go, I'm going to buy some vegetables and make a salad to feed my microbiome. So I think Parkinson's people a lot of times want to get better, but that dopamine isn't there to move them forward.
No, that was a good clarification. I appreciate that, because you're right. There is a distinction between the motivation and the desire.
Yeah.
So there is, I would say universally, there's a desire to get better.
Yes. Yes.
So I misspoke actually, because there's a desire to get better, but you're absolutely correct. The motivation is innately gone because of the fact that they have this built-in apathy, depression, and anxiety because of the lack of dopamine.
Correct.
I've talked about that in other videos too, is the connections with all the different areas of the brain because of basically the domino effect of not having dopamine. You've got your nucleus accumbens that's affected by that. You've got your I'm just now blanked, but anyway, that you have multiple directions.
The hypothalamus especially. That's where a lot of that comes from. And I do think, unfortunately, what's hard is that a lot of people get that diagnosis and then it becomes, okay, what can I do to fix it? And there's just not enough support around to go, okay, dopamine is the issue, but what you got to do is make your list and make sure that your food's good and get your probiotics in and get your vitamin D therapeutic and take your omega-3. And I think that there's not enough of that to kind of move desire and motivation forward. So
well, it's like every good story, Luke Skywalker wouldn't have defeated the Empire, or at least succeeded with that mission of destroying the Death Star without the guide, right? So he needed the Jedi guide, which was Obi-Wan Kenobi. So that's where people like you and myself come in. We're the guides, and you as a person with Parkinson's listening are the hero of the story. Anyway, that's a great, really, really interesting stuff that we're talking about today. And just briefly, if we can, would you mind going into a little bit, just briefly, about the study that was done that you mentioned a couple of times?
Yeah. So the study was a real small study, and it took 20 patients. So 10 got plasma and 10 got placebo. The placebo was yellow color fluid, even though everything was colored. So everybody was blinded. The neurologist that did the study didn't know what patient got what, and the patients didn't know who got what. And basically we did baseline UPDRS, like the Parkinson score. And then they got a liter of plasma a day off, and then another liter of plasma, or a liter of placebo a day off and a liter of placebo. Now, because this was, what is the plasma going to do? We didn't do microbiome testing. Nobody's vitamin D was checked. They basically got whatever they were getting from their neurologic studies. So this was just, hey, can this make a difference while we build on it? And then we did 1 month blood levels of CBC, chemistry, inflammatory markers. Biggest issue there was it also combined safety. And like we talked about before we started,
Right.
as an OB-GYN, I hung a lot of plasma. We hung a lot of plasma, a lot of blood. People talk about plasma not being safe. There's no, the reactivity. The FDA, I think, said they hung, I can't remember, 21 or 25 million units of plasma, like in 2019. And remember, they're looking at everything. They're just not looking at the slow hang, but they're looking at trauma patients where you're just pushing tons of blood and plasma in. And you can fluid overload somebody if you push in too much, but you're not doing that when you're doing a gentle, slow therapeutic hang in the doctor's office. But even there, I think there were like 45 out of 200 million problems. I mean, the safety is just, it's a very, very safe. And anybody that does get a little bit of an itch or a little bit of a hive, we give them Benadryl. So patients did very, very well with it. And we followed them 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months out. So the safety, of course, was no problems. And what we found with not only the Parkinson score, but we also did something called the Stanford Presenteeism scale. And I love that part of the study because that basically looks at the patients look at their own quality of life, how they feel at their work. I love that. It's
That's
not
huge.
about me. Yeah, because it's not about me and it's not about you and it's not about anybody else. It's about that person who's got to live every day, who's got to get up and feel good about their life. And I feel good in my job and I don't feel like my illness is getting in the way of my job and I'm present at my work. And not only did the cumulative score 1 through 3 in the Parkinson score get better, but they got statistically significantly better in the Stanford Presenteeism score. So people felt better. So we saw improvement, safety, as well as just innate quality of life in each of the patients get better. And I think as we expand it, if I could sit everybody down and go, okay, now I'm doing a stool test. Now we're going to get your bugs back in line again. Now we're going to make sure you eat 3 cups of vegetables every day. And I want you to pull the gluten inflammatory stuff out and back off on the, I think you'd see an even more dramatic improvement.
Excuse me, though. Sorry for that sound.
No worries.
It was on silent. I'm not sure why it did that.
All good. All good.
But yeah, that's the self-efficacy aspect of that is huge. And that's the thing is everybody with Parkinson's needs that. So
yes, everybody with anything needs that. Anybody that's ever, I was an overtrained athlete, overtrained, non-sleeping OBGYN. I always had a small practice. And in 2018, I went to work one day to check up on a patient, had a terrible headache and had somebody check my blood pressure and it was 160 over 110. I got admitted to the ER. We didn't know what it was. I felt terrible. And in the long run, it took me about 2.5, 3 years to heal myself. But guess what it was? It was stress. It was lack of sleep, delivering babies in the middle of the night, running place to place. But you know what? It took my pressure would spike out of nowhere. And I understand that because when you're somebody that says, well, maybe I can't go to the grocery store. Maybe what happens if I get sick there? Then my head's it's paralyzing. And when you get better, man, I get up every day and I walk in the sunshine and I go, my pressure's normal. I'm feeling better. So that's huge. So when you can give people their life back just to appreciate life itself, I think it's a massive gift. And that's what I hope the combination does. And hopefully listening to this podcast, making some of those small changes and keeping your eyes out for the plasma that we're going to do more and more about. But I'm hoping it can really affect the quality of life of everybody.
Well, and that's huge. And that's the biggest thing there is right there is quality of life. And that's huge. And yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate this conversation as well as the basically highlighting these things that really some of these things I'm relearning, but also learning new things, especially this plasma treatment. So let us know too, especially for everybody listening. I want to make sure people know if they're interested in learning more about this, where they can get in touch with you.
So we try to do as much content as possible to kind of for everybody to learn. So if you go to my Dian Ginsberg MD website or YouTube page, we've got a bunch of videos, all free videos on there that say, you know, the gluten Hashimoto connection and the gluten neuro connection and why hormones are significant and how to detox. So if you go to that or go to our YouTube channel, we've got tons of videos on that. And then if you go to www.youngplasmastudy.com, all the info on the studies there and information about plasma. And if you're kind of a science nerd, there's a ton of, you know, PubMed papers that you can read about longevity and neurodegeneration and young factors and how some of that is affected in the rat studies and then how it carries over into humans. But
well, that's
it makes everybody to put it all together.
No, that's great. Those are great places to start. I feel like
Absolutely.
So y'all, I mean, if you're listening, please do check that out. She mentioned a website, dianginsbergmd.com, as well as the YouTube channel, which I assume they can search for your name on that.
Yep.
And then youngplasmastudy.com to get more details on the frozen plasma treatment and the research. And Dr. Ginsberg, thank you so much for your time today and for being on. And it was good to meet you. Dian is Dr. Ginsberg is in my Facebook group on Facebook Parkinson's Warriors International. The Facebook group is where we met, and I do want to invite you also to feel free to post on this as well. I'd like to share
questions. If people reach out and say, hey, can you do info on this or info on that or more on the microbiome? If they want to reach out to you and you want to say to me, hey, let's do something, you know, 10 minutes on this or that, I'm happy to answer whatever we can do to support in any way.
I love that. And I do have your permission to share this video as well.
Oh, absolutely, wherever you want. Oh, yeah.
That'd be awesome, because I could share it, not only my YouTube, but I could put it in the Facebook group as well so people can watch it. So,
and any questions I'm happy to answer. I'll keep my eyes out to answer anything I can for anybody. All
right, awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And for everybody listening, just don't forget to consider a membership to our Patreon, just to give us a little bit of a hat tip in the production of the show. It's completely free for you to listen to, but it's not free for us to produce. So for as little as $2 a month, you can help us out in that way. Patreon.com/PDWarriors, or a one-time tip would be great as well at our PayPal at paypal.me/HylandPTW. And again, thank you to Dr. Ginsberg for being on today. And for everybody listening, remember, as Parkinson's warriors, we're strong, empowered, and united. We'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks a lot.